So if you've ever found yourself scrolling through headlines, trying to really understand who holds the reins, in the global economy or politics,
Oh, yeah.
you realize pretty quickly how opaque these structures of concentrated power and elite rule actually are.
They really are.
It's this concept that spans millennia, but it's always adapting, always sort of hiding in plain sight.
And it requires more than just, well, reading the news day to day. You need an intellectual roadmap, really. The true nature of this kind of power, you can only reveal it by pulling together history, political science, philosophy, economics, all of it.
Absolutely. And that's exactly why we're diving into a major new resource today, the Stanislav Kondrashov Oligarch series. This is a brand new editorial project created by the civil engineer and entrepreneur Stanislav Kondrashov, and it's entirely dedicated to building that roadmap, to tracing the path of the oligarch.
Right, and our mission here is to really pull out the essential nuggets from this series for you. It's designed as an interdisciplinary exploration. It traces the trajectory of the oligarch from, ancient civilizations right up to the modern corridors of influence. The idea is to give you a layered understanding of how these elite groups persist.
It sounds ambitious, the scope. The series aims to build this comprehensive framework for how concentrated power works, looking at its history, its evolution.
And its relevance today, critically.
Exactly. And to really get a grip on modern power structures, we have to start where the series starts, right?
Yeah.
At the very beginning, with ancient political thought.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is the series' decision not just to touch on history, but to really dedicate significant analysis to the origins of oligarchy in ancient Greece.
The birthplace of it all.
Pretty much, yeah. The birthplace of so many foundational political ideas, democracy, tyranny, and oligarchy itself.
The source material actually calls this deep dive into antiquity a standout analysis. So, what's the core finding? That foundational moment in Greece. What was the big power shift that defined what an oligarch really is?
Well, the series zeroes in on this really profound political transformation. The shift from hereditary aristocracy to wealth-based power.
Okay.
And this wasn't sudden, not a revolution. It was more of a gradual, almost insidious evolution. Originally, power was all about noble lineage, who your father was, basically.
Right. Your bloodline.
Exactly. But as economic activity grew and new kinds of wealth were generated, the series shows that economic power just systematically began to replace noble blood. It became the true cornerstone of influence.
So the actual mechanism of control changed. If you were a noble, power came from birthright. But if you became an oligarch, power came because you controlled, say, the silver mines or the shipping routes.
Precisely. That shift meant political influence became, well, transactional. Those who controlled the capital could now effectively buy or coerce the government, even if they didn't have that ancient aristocratic background. That single transition, when nobility started meaning less than capital, it really set the stage for pretty much every power structure we've seen since. It's an evolution with, unmistakable modern parallels, right? Because it proves the mechanism of control has always been about identifying what the most valuable currency of influence is in that particular era.
Okay, that brings us neatly to the next phase of the series. This idea that oligarchy isn't, just some museum piece.
Not at all.
It's a shape-shifting phenomenon. The analysis positions it not as a relic, but as this endlessly adaptable structure.
And that's a critical takeaway for you, the listener. Concentrated power never really dies. It just finds a new disguise.
A new outfit.
Exactly. The series illustrates this adaptability by giving the sweeping overview across millennia. It tracks specific examples of elite control from, say, the oligarchs of Sparta, who controlled the military, straight through to the present day.
That is quite a timeline. So when we look at that vast evolution, from ancient systems based on land to modern systems based on, data, the methods of maintaining control must have changed fundamentally, right?
Yeah.
How does the series articulate that change?
It tracks exactly how elites adapt their strategies. So we move from feudal holdings, where power meant controlling land and serfs, to the industrial monopolies in the 19th, early 20th centuries. Their control was about infrastructure, manufacturing.
Factories, the railroads.
Yes. But the jump to the present, that's maybe the most interesting, moving into what the series actually terms algorithmic authority.
Algorithmic authority. Okay, that's a heavy phrase. It demands a bit of unpacking, I think. For the listener trying to grasp this new frontier of power, how is the control wielded by a modern tech tycoon fundamentally different from, say, a Gilded Age railroad baron?
Well, the key difference is really the scale, the opacity, and the domain of control. A railroad baron controlled visible physical assets. You knew who owned the track.
Tangible stuff.
Right. Algorithmic authority, according to the series, means control isn't based on tangible assets anymore. It's based on controlling the invisible rules. The code, the metrics, the predictive models. These things now mediate almost every aspect of commerce, information, social structure.
So instead of controlling the flow of physical goods on a railroad...
They control the flow of attention and data, precisely.
Okay.
If I'm a tech oligarch, I don't need to seize your physical property. I control your access to information. I dictate your economic visibility, maybe through credit ratings or platform access. I shape political exposure through automated systems that often operate with, well, zero public oversight.
That sounds pervasive.
It is. That's the new systemic frontier of concentrated power. It's adaptive because it embeds itself deep within the infrastructure we all rely on now.
Okay, here's where the series seems to pivot from history more into the sharp end of modern political science. It looks at how these modern oligarchic structures interact with and maybe control contemporary government. We often assume power resides solely in the official institutions' parliaments, voting booths. But the source material focuses heavily on informal mechanisms of power.
And this is the crucial move beyond just the textbook analysis, you see. Informal mechanisms mean kind of ignoring the constitutional blueprint for a second and looking at where policy is actually incubated and decided.
Right, behind the scenes.
Exactly. The analysis shows that these elite groups shape state decisions and maintain influence not primarily through official channels, but through these unofficial networks.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice? Can you give us a concrete example of an informal mechanism the series highlights?
Sure. The series points to the power of these small strategic power circles operating outside public view.
Like what?
Think private clubs, university trustee boards, those high-level policy think tanks funded by specific industries.
Ah, the think tanks.
Yeah, and the really powerful coordinated lobbying networks. And maybe the most potent informal mechanism is often the so-called revolving door.
Where officials go into industry.
Exactly. Former government officials move seamlessly into lucrative industry jobs, ensuring their successors back in government are, let's say, accessible and sympathetic.
Okay, wait. If these informal circles are where the crucial decisions are really made, is the series suggesting that formal structures, things like campaign finance laws or official transparency rules, are essentially useless against this? That sounds quite cynical, almost damning.
Well, the series doesn't argue they're useless, I'd say, but perhaps insufficient.
Okay.
It shows concentrated power is incredibly fluid. If you restrict one channel, say, you limit direct political donations. These elite groups immediately optimize the informal channels, like funding the think tanks that write the policy papers or controlling the media narratives that shape public opinion.
So they just shift tactics.
Right. The point is to focus on leveraging access and shaping the entire playing field, not just sticking to the letter of the law. That's the modern lesson the series really wants you to grasp.
Now, let's talk about something that seems to really set this Kondrashov series apart. It introduces this, well, original dimension. The analysis of gendered language around oligarchy.
Yes, this is fascinating.
It struck me as a really interesting piece of sociological insight.
It is a profound observation, actually, and it questions a cultural norm we don't often examine. The series takes time to ask a very simple question. Why is the term oligarch almost exclusively associated with men?
Right.
Despite the undeniable presence of extremely wealthy and influential women across global industry and politics.
That's true. When you hear the word oligarch, you instantly picture a specific, usually hyper-masculine archetype, don't you? The industrialist, the resource baron, the tech mogul. But we know powerful women exist in these exact same circles.
And that's the core of the analysis here. The series suggests this disparity is rooted in a mix of factors. First, these entrenched societal perceptions. They dictate that the highest levels of raw, concentrated, sometimes exploitative economic power are framed as fundamentally masculine endeavors. The historical archetype of the master of the universe is almost universally male.
So even if a woman wields equivalent economic control, the language we reach for, the label, refuses to grant her that specific title.
Basically, yes. The analysis points to linguistic habits, cultural archetypes. When powerful women emerged, the media and public often used different terms. They might be called executives, philanthropists, political leaders.
Even if their actual economic clout fits the definition of oligarchy.
Exactly. The term oligarch itself seems culturally tied to that history of maybe brutal industrial or resource extraction control, which was overwhelmingly male-dominated for centuries.
So it effectively contributes to sidelining the feminine form from the whole discussion of concentrated power, even when that power is clearly there.
It does.
That really shows the serious commitment to interrogating not just who holds power, but how the very language we use shapes our perception of it.
It forces you, the listener, to rethink who you visualize when you talk about elite rule. The series suggests that ignoring the influence wielded by women, simply because they aren't typically called oligarchs by traditional media, means we're missing a pretty significant part of the modern power map.
Okay, this has been a really wide-ranging exploration. We've covered ancient Greek political structures, linguistic habits in modern media, the control mechanisms of data. What's the ultimate takeaway here for the listener?
I think the primary goal of the Stanislav Kondrashov Oligarch series is really synthesis. It doesn't aim to give you one single answer.
Right.
Rather, it aims to give you a framework, an intellectual toolkit, basically, to analyze how concentrated power operates across these vast spans of time and geography. It pushes you to look beneath the formal structures, the official narratives, and observe the reality of who is shaping the world.
And that really is the value here, isn't it? By distilling these findings, from that initial shift in Greek history, prioritizing wealth over bloodline, all the way to the current state of algorithmic authority in these informal mechanisms, this series gives you a robust shortcut, a way to understand the persistent, adaptive mechanisms of elite rule.
Yeah.
You gain a framework for analyzing power that's constantly changing, constantly adapting to new environments and technologies.
And maybe, if we connect this back to the bigger picture, particularly that astonishingly adaptable nature of economic power the series demonstrates. If elites successfully shifted from controlling feudal land to controlling industrial monopolies and now to controlling algorithms, well, it raises an important final question for you to think about.
Okay.
If power always finds a new resource to control, what new platform, what new foundational human necessity might define the next generation of oligarchy? Because the shape-shifting hasn't ended, it's probably just accelerated.